Welcome to Reinventing U, a podcast of the Association of Undergraduate Education at Research Universities, which is abbreviated as URU to emphasize the UERU in our name. URU is a Boyer-inspired national consortium of over 130 U.S. research universities dedicated to growth and development in undergraduate education, specifically at research universities. Many URU members pursue the proposition, in the language of the Boyer 2030 report, that equity and excellence are inextricably entwined in democratic society, and therefore that in pursuit of excellence, it is imperative that we address students' needs fairly and effectively.
We're your hosts, Julia Michaels, URU Director of Development and Strategic Partnerships, and Steve Dandino, who you just heard from, URU Executive Director and Associate Provost at Colorado State University, which has been the host of URU since 2013. Steve and I are delighted to welcome Kathleen deLaski as our guest today to discuss her book, Who Needs College Anymore? Imagining a Future Where Degrees Don't Matter. This book just came out in February 2025 from Harvard Education Press. Kathleen spent 20 years as a journalist before turning to education finance and reform. She's founded several nonprofits, including Education Design Lab, which works with colleges to create shorter and more affordable pathways for learners to achieve their economic goals. Kathleen remains on the board of the Education Design Lab and teaches human-centered design at George Mason University. Kathleen is also a philanthropist, managing the deLaski Family Foundation, which for 25 years has been a grant maker in education reform, well-being, sustainable agriculture, and the arts. Welcome, Kathleen deLaski.
Well, thank you for having me.
All right, let's dig in. For listeners who haven't read the book, could you please give us a quick overview of its main ideas? What is it about and who is it written for?
Well, thank you very much. I wrote the book really because I have spent the last 10 years really working with what we call new majority learners. So the students or the learners for whom college was never designed. The organization that you just mentioned that I founded, the Education Design Lab, works with those learners and the colleges that are trying to support them. And what has become clear to us over time, and I also spent time in the K-12 world. So, the sort of that pipeline problem that we've been having, the access agenda in particularly, and the completion agenda that is so important to all of us. What we have learned over time, I think it just has to be said that it's not working, that the college degree, the 4-year college degree is not a model that is working for many of the very folks that we want to create equity and access with and for. And a lot of people don't want to say that. And I'm sort of in the twilight of my career at this point, and so maybe I have a little less to lose to, stir up good trouble. But I felt that there are so many other alternative pathways that are, that everyone agrees are excellent, but they are not supported or evaluated or elevated in the public's mind to the same level. And I'm not thinking of them, I'm not suggesting that they replace colleges. And we're talking, by the way, about apprenticeships, short-term credentials, industry certifications, boot camps, even programs like Year Up, if some of your listeners are familiar with groups like that, nonprofit groups. Why I'm not looking for them to replace college. I'm looking for them, and many folks are saying this, right, to be part of the umbrella of offerings that colleges uh, sort of put together and offer at institutions, because colleges need to change in an age when you can have knowledge in the palm of your hand. So we don't need to go to have our minds just filled up with information. We still need to be we still need to learn to collaborate, how to meet deadlines and get along with people who are different from us and learn critical thinking. All those things are critical, but more over time, people are just so focused on the career enhancing benefits of college. In other words, they go to college to be able to to launch a good career. And so that is becoming the focus. And, that we're not able to, we're able to deliver on that as colleges less and less. And so I think we need to think broader about the definition of college. So the book looks across different stakeholders. It uses a human design approach, as you mentioned in the setup, which looks at the needs of end users, and the end users are the learners, right? But I do chapters on what are employers, what are early adopter employers doing, what are early adopter colleges doing, what are early adopter high schools doing, and then I devote a whole chapter to who does need college anymore, like what type of learners still absolutely this is the surefire or the best ticket for them, and what types of learners do we see starting to take other kinds of pathways, and what might the new normal look like, by mid-century in terms of who's getting degrees, what employers are expecting, what colleges, how colleges are adapting, and is what's happening to the college for all movement, which has sort of reigned supreme for the last 30 years, but is beginning to lose its momentum for sure.
Well, congratulations on this book. It's so wonderful. It really resonated with me as a person who grew up in Flint, Michigan, and was the first in my family to go to college. I made me think about all the possibilities that were there then or not there then that are increasingly now available to students. If I could simplify just a bit, and ask you this question. The book talks about two conflicting narratives, if you will. One that claims that college is not worth the expense, and the other maintains that college is indeed essential for obtaining, great jobs over one's life course. So others, though, like the higher ed scholar Kathy Davidson, for one, argue that making a living in one's long-term career prospects and education for democracy, education as an end in itself, as a humanistic enterprise, are all best understood as integrated goals or values as part of education, as she writes, for world readiness.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the language that the Boyer 2030 Commission decided to adopt as well, world readiness. How do you respond to that framing of the issue?
Yeah, I love the idea of world readiness. I think we need it now more than ever, right? Because there aren't many there. The other channels that would provide that for society are being broken down, are being taken away. Whether it's USAID or the Voice of America, or the Fulbright fellowships, and the kinds of things. Um, um, that are AmeriCorps, the other ways that you might become a citizen of the world are, we're starting to lose them, at least for now. And so I think the college degree, for the other reasons than job preparation, do become central. But I think we also have to recognize that the at least the perception of the price tag is becoming out of reach for more and more families. And so, you're sitting around the kitchen table, as I did with, I went and met with families, and you're doing this cost benefit analysis. And, young people and their parents are hearing from friends that, oh, well, I got a degree and I'm still living in my parents' basement. I couldn't get a job in my field. I mean, I probably know 10 or 15 young people who are in that situation right now. My own daughter was in it for a couple of years after she graduated. She couldn't get a job in her field. She ended up working in a bike shop. And that is, so it's that cost benefit analysis that people are doing. And as the price tag gets higher, they're starting to choose not to go for it. And so, part of the question is, why does it have to be so binary? Why can't college be more of a stepladder approach where you can come in and out? You can get shorter term learning. You can do shorter term learning stacks, what we call at the lab micro pathways. And some community colleges are starting to do this. The lab is working with 100 of them right now, where you're getting a 4 to 6 month or sometimes a year boot camp style training program. And that is designed with employers in your region. They're looking to hire, and that is meant to lead to a job. We don't have a lot of data yet because these programs are new, and as many of your listeners know, short-term credentials, even those delivered by colleges, a lot of them are on the non-credit side of the house, do not have, we don't have good data because we're not we're not collecting it, right? So that's one of the movements I'm involved in is the groups that are helping colleges uh, try to start collecting that data, because we do need to prove out that that short-term pathways that might stack to a degree, but don't have to. I think that is the future at all but elite colleges. And because then I think people will see the value proposition. It doesn't answer the world readiness problem though, because what I just described sounds like a series of just-in-time learning opportunities, which are going to mainly be job related and technical. So, I think the task of those of us in higher ed is how do we offer those in the context of a university setting? And I'm working with folks where I teach at George Mason University on this topic. How do we keep the critical thinking learning and the creativity and the curiosity and the empathy, all the pieces that we all know make up what we're trying to call now durable skills or human skills, rather than soft skills. But those are the ones that will transcend the AI agentic bots that could replace us, right, in the workplace. How do we keep that in? And just one quick example of how we're trying to do that at the lab with community colleges is that when we do those short-term boot camp pathways micro pathways I've described, we to kind of qualify as a lab endorsed micro pathway, they have to have at least one micro credential included that teaches a critical thinking, or basically it's a micro credential learning set of modules, right? That teach at least one of those key um, uh, durable skills that the employer for that job role recommends. So, that's our small effort, right, to try to save gen ed.
Well, I want to follow up on some of the things you just said. So you emphasized in the book that relevant paid work-based experiences must be offered to all students. But we know that these opportunities do tend to be in limited supply. Sometimes they're boutique programs or they're internships that not everyone can access. You were, in fact, just partnered with Podium Education, which helps integrate work-based learning into the curriculum to support our members with that very problem. But what other successful models have you seen for scaling work-based learning so that we can truly ensure
Huh.
experience for all, as you put it? How might colleges integrate these more directly or partner with others in that educational village to expand access?
Yeah, that's a great question. And interestingly, you mentioned Podium Education that you just partnered with. The only reason I didn't mention Podium in the book, because I'm a huge fan, is that my daughter has been working for them for the past couple of years. And I thought it would be a conflict of interest. In fact, it's the daughter I profile in the book who didn't go to college, but actually built up expertise through a boot camp in digital marketing, and ended up being she taught digital marketing, um, because they bring in industry in people from industry, right? So she was basically like a TA for several years in some of their classes. So I followed her journey, what she's doing with she's working with schools like ASU and Purdue and Central Florida, and it's fascinating because the students love those courses. And she would share with me her the feedback, and they actually get compensated based on in part they get like bonuses if they get high ratings from the students. And they loved her, they loved the classes because they were getting practical digital marketing learning experiences taught by people in the industry. And I think it's really smart the way Podium is partnering with colleges to deliver. I think it's an excellent way to think about scaling. Other ways include the platform partners that exist right now who are, they have employers on their platform and it's like a matching service. I profile in the book Ripen, or RIIPEN, which some of you know, which has about 600 employers on their platform who offer up to their partner schools basically gig work, but it's project-based work that's actual work that they want done. And the professor, the class professor has to figure out how to like incorporate it into, directly into a course. But that's getting, great feedback. I talked to professors at University of North Dakota because that's a university that is in a place in Northeast. I think they're in Northeast North Dakota. There aren't a lot of employers to send your students out to in-person internships, right? So colleges like that one, as well as all the, online colleges, they need to figure out how to either do it virtually or another trend line that we're seeing is this is kind of just in the early days is kind of simulation, the idea of simulated, so not real, but simulated experiences. That's another thing we see happening. So just to summarize, those are actual workforce experiences. What we also see are trends to try to incorporate the industry certification. So you're not getting the experience, but you're getting the credential that has hiring signaling power for particular jobs. Some colleges are now incorporating those. I profile the University of Texas. The whole system has partnered with Coursera to offer those micro credentials to basically everyone.
Julia, we have to insert a program note here that neither you or I knew of Kathleen deLaski's personal connection with Podium. It came as a
I
surprise
know,
to
it's a
us.
All right.
surprise.
It's a surprise to us. We're not
Yeah.
that wily or
Yeah.
sophisticated. Thank you. Uh, so let me ask, Kathleen, if I may, how might specifically research universities, which is our constituency
Mhm.
here at URU, how might specifically research universities help undergraduate students articulate the valuable skills that, when things go according to Hoyle, they acquire over the course of their baccalaureate experience, such as, in addition to the more general critical thinking and problem solving skills we talk about, but also, the understanding of scientific inquiry enriched by current research and immersion in maximally diverse learning environments,
Mhm.
where every or almost every intellectual pursuit is represented, such as George Mason and schools like that. How might we how might we do a better job of inculcating that understanding of the research university value proposition
Right.
in our students and our other constituents? How might, if we did a better job, put it that way, help research universities meet the challenge of the current moment when so
Mhm.
many people question, as you point out, the value proposition?
Right. Well, I think the first step is translating learning outcomes to skills that a learner would take into their job application process. I mean, that's just a very practical step. And I profile probably the university that's known to be doing that the best, or one of the best, is Western Governors University, which is, they're an online university. They're one of the largest in the country. But what they've created this library, which I recommend to folks. I think I tell you how to get there in the book, but it's a library called the Open Skills uh, from the Open Skills Network, and you go in and you put in a either a skill or a job role, and it will to kind of tell you what the sort of the digital data that you might need to create a either a micro credential, but also just to be able to use it as talking points with your students. And Western Governors has each of its facilitators or coaches that work with students um, basically create a skills profile, which I describe in the book, which anyone can do, and they've put on any college, any institution could do that. They actually have it on there as it's an open website. Anyone can use the material. But so that's one thing, which is help your students create skills profiles. And then individual professors, I'm trying to do this in my classes. I think I also, recommend that we should, when we're teaching a class or creating a syllabus, it's super easy now and AI is making it easier, but you can even just go on job sites like Indeed and look at, okay, I'm teaching this class. What would I hope that my students could put on their resume when they finish it? And just, go to the job sites and see how it translates and do one of your classes. I mean, I ran polls and a poll in my class to say, do you feel like you could put this on your resume? And I show them what the skill looks like on a job description rather than in my syllabus. And I would say I didn't do that well. I mean, I would say a lot of them felt they weren't confident to put it on their resume, and they gave me like a B minus. But I think that's one of the just practices that we should get into as faculty. Is to think about how it's going to translate for the student, and whether we're adding value class by class in that regard.
Well, I'm so glad that you mentioned AI. One of the early chapters in your book talks about boot camps, and with the recent advances in AI doing things such as coding quite well, students who attended coding boot camps in the past may be realizing that their skills are potentially becoming obsolete. So, given how rapidly the skills environment is changing, even just from month to month,
Right.
how can we help learners become more resilient, more future-proof, particularly as the entry-level jobs that they might pursue are disappearing to AI?
Yes, this is one of the areas that I plan to do some more writing about on my Substack, because, as you say, it changes every month, so it's evolving even since the time I published the book in January. Um, what we what we know what we know about the skills that folks are going to need in the future, right? Because I'm asking everybody I talk to, what should we be doing with students to prepare them for? Because we're sort of in the eye of the cyclone right now, right? So it's going to keep changing. So but we need to start changing our practices, but they're going to have to evolve, in ways that we probably can't even hold in our brains right now. But what we know so far, right, is that to be hired entry level in a knowledge worker job, starting now, because we already see the hits to job postings at entry level, you need to be able to demonstrate that you, the individual, can harness the tools that make you more productive and level you up. You need to be able to demonstrate that you can do that. So that means that in college, right, we have to help students, be on the cutting edge themselves. We all have to be on the cutting edge of how to use these tools and learn together. And I think that's, what I would suggest. That's what I'm trying to do in my classes. I mean, not well yet at this point, but let's, because I'm not that fluent. But it's to be able to demonstrate the curiosity and the ability to move with the technology. And I'm not sure what to call that yet. Um, I think that's one of the areas that I want to work on, because the lab has worked on this area of defining um, 21st century skills, and what maybe we should now be calling human skills. We've worked on that and actually created a framework over the past 10 years. We've created a framework for colleges to use to break down, like, what is critical thinking? What are the sub competencies of it? What is empathy? What are the sub competencies of it? And we actually created learning paths for that. But we're now in discussion about, okay, this all has to evolve, and what do we call the sub competencies today, and how do we begin just teaching them, knowing that they're going to change?
Did you say you were in the twilight of your career or something like that? Doesn't sound like it. You sound very busy with projects. Those sound like rather challenging pursuits.
Yeah, well, as you mentioned in the intro, I was the CEO of the lab and the founder, but I'm now the board chair. So I say we, and I'm not sidelined completely, because I'm able to work on some of these projects, but there's a team that's doing things better than I could at this point.
Royal we, of course. We use that all the time. Well, so we come to the last question then that we plan to pose. You were recording this conversation in May of 2025, and we're thinking, like, let's end on a positive note. So here we are. We've got a lot of uncertainty, obviously, economically and otherwise. We're discussing the the rate, the rapidity of technological change very high. It's always been high, but now it's even higher, it feels. And so people are experiencing just a lot of anxiety and concern. And that goes not only for students, but for university leadership and
Yeah.
just about everyone, it feels like. So, given where we're at now, what would you recommend, as a good place or different places to start conversation and action toward implementing the changes that you recommend at research universities, which are notoriously, difficult to change because of their complexity and such
Right.
institutions. What are the very best first steps given where we're at?
Yeah, no, I think it's a great question because you can't necessarily I say in the book that I subscribe to the fix and disrupt school of innovation because I recognize I was on the board of George Mason for 8 years. So I actually, yeah, I mean, boy, it's hard. I understand that. So, I mean, I, I think if we have a mental model in our head that research universities, maybe all but the most elite, uh, would move to a model by mid-century where they offer more models than just the four-year degree. Like if you have that as a mental model for kind of a future state or a North Star, which I think we need to get to, like, okay, what do you do now? I think what you do now is what I highlight in the chapter called Can Colleges Adapt, which is more connectivity to experiential to work-based experience, more I don't want to say unbundling because people hate that word because that sounds like you're going to lose you're going to lose the um, you're going to lose market share or the students are going to not enroll if you unbundle the degree. But to think about offering pieces, either partnering with industry players, partnering with other kinds of players to offer experiences and experiment with smaller increments of learning, because I think it's going to head there, and anyone who's ahead of that is going to win the day. I mean, you see some of the forward-leaning folks like ASU, Western governors, Southern New Hampshire, they always get a lot of airtime. Those folks, if you look, beneath the degree programs, they still lead with that, but there's a lot of other sub um, sub-degree offerings that are fast growing, and I think so. It would behoove, I think, universities to look at those kind of opportunities. One research, if there's time to mention, one research opportunity that I don't write about in the book, but I probably should have, and this is also a UT system. They are doing something called Maymesters for their research oriented. What they recognize, students, they recognize that a lot of the industry certifications that were offered through their Coursera partnership didn't really help, the student majoring in biology or chemistry. And so they created a separate opportunity for them called Maymesters, which is basically where they're partnering with labs so that the students could have those workforce experiences if they're more in some of the STEM fields, particularly the hard sciences.
Innovations in the calendar, like Maymesters or January,
Hmm.
3 week, that's not uncommon
Right.
in higher education. So you're suggesting that might be a great way to use an existing modality in order to
Structure.
make, create some space for students to have these more intensive and immersive
Yeah.
experiences that the employers and they both need. Yeah, it's a good point. It's very practical. It's very achievable. Yeah.
Well, thank you, Kathleen. We so appreciate you talking with us about your book today and hope this conversation helps our URU members think critically about how they can contribute to redesigning the undergraduate experience for the future. URU members can log into My URU to hear 2 additional questions and some concluding discussion for UVPs and their colleagues. For now, though, thanks to listeners of Reinventing U, a podcast of the Association for Undergraduate Education at Research Universities, or URU. Reinventing U is available wherever you get your podcasts. To learn more about URU, check us out at ueru.org. Kathleen, you mentioned there are a few types of learners who really do need college, and I'll just list them here. The class transporters, legitimacy label seekers, degree or license workers, and longing to belongers. How might universities position themselves to identify, attract, and serve those types of learners more explicitly?
Yeah, that's a big question. Yeah, I take most of a chapter to answer it in the book, but to try to summarize, the what the part about what I see happening that breaks my heart the most is that the people who need the um, both the structure and the social capital and the sort of code switching, the people who need college the most often are the ones who are going into debt the most. When you look at who's carrying what kind of debt loads, they're the ones going into the most debt to try to get that education. And but you also see some of the people in that category that just are, left on the outside, or they try college and they feel like they get spit out of the gauntlet. So what, and a lot of the people in these categories are either people from immigrant families, first in family. I think a lot of us know the profiles, returning veterans, single moms. I mean, these are some of the bigger categories of, students of color. Um, these are some of the big categories of what we call the new majority learners, but they are in the majority of, the population, and they are part of the reason why 62% of American adults do not have a four-year degree. So your question is, what can colleges do to support those folks better? I mean, there's been wonderful innovation and some success, right, in both access for those students as well as completion. I mean, there has been, a lot of success stories, and I feel like a lot of the energy is around student success of people who come through the door. But a lot of the folks I've followed and gotten to know are the people who don't come through the door or came through the door and left. And I know it's really hard for colleges to track stopouts. But so one of the things, and for research universities, um, I mean, I think I would recommend what we're doing with community colleges is creating short-term pathways for new entrants into college. And the data is showing that it's working, in the sense that those folks are showing up at the door of the community college that wouldn't have otherwise. Their first time, attempters, and they're earning a, 4 to 6 month micro pathway in a job related field. Um, could you, at a research university, think about what the opportunity is there with that group? And I know people have tried through, and do try and do succeed through continuing education programs. But I mean, what I feel like research universities need to do, and if you were doing this, is create the sort of to think about what are the entry level jobs in, cybersecurity, AI, maybe of various healthcare things like behavioral health. We're actually creating new roles in behavioral health. Um, why can't there be short-term pathways that are at these prestigious universities? I mean, you'd have to have more word of mouth to get people to show up at the door, but that can be done. And even partnering with the community colleges. It doesn't only have to be the research university doesn't only have to do the degree, the four-year degree. They can do shorter form to attract, and it's a great pipeline, opportunity as well.
Kathleen, you compare the diverse ecosystem of educational providers to the craft beer market. And I mentioned before that I'm from Flint, Michigan, which is like the Anheuser-Busch or the Miller beer market. Nothing
The
like the
craft
craft
beer.
beer market, but you're referring to, a robust and healthy market with many small hyper-local providers, that produce a high quality product. Which may address the scaling problem that's kind of implicit in a lot of in the book and in the problem that you're addressing. So, how might colleges and universities, partner with, be more productive in their partnering with providers, local providers, and others to help serve students in their communities.
Right. I mean, this actually builds on from the previous question, which is if you are going to offer other things besides a 4-year degree, you need a partnering strategy to do that. And I mean, I give the example of Year Up, which is it's a national organization. It has fabulous data that demonstrate that when, low-income students do a 6-month training and then a 6-month internship placement, they go on to have outcomes that parallel, many colleges' outcomes. And that's a 1-year program. So why can't colleges like bring those kinds of programs in-house? And so some community colleges have been doing that with Year Up. And maybe it makes more sense in a community college setting, but so that's a partnership strategy at the community college level. But you could imagine other sorts of training programs. There's all kinds of tech ones like Perscolis and Merit America are two of the ones that have been able to scale nationally. And I think some universities are partnering with them, but it's really a matter of figuring out who can we partner with that can deliver some of the pipeline, um, as well as what's the value add that we provide. And maybe it's the employers, maybe it's the laboratory experiences, but there are all kinds of partnership opportunities. But it does require, one of the things I say in the book, it does require universities to think differently about both their, community engagement strategy and their employer engagement strategy, to be more outward facing. I mean, usually universities think about their research partners and their employer partners, but this, I think if you're serving a broader range of the population, you're going to have to, partner with more of a variety of folks. And that's probably one piece of it.
Yeah, we're really grateful for this, conversation, Kathleen. Is there anything you'd like to add here at the end, for our Research University Leader audience?
Well, I would just say I have a lot of empathy for, I know what a tough time it is. I live in the Washington, D.C. area where I have, many friends who who were, at various agencies who I'm trying to help through a new job search. So I know it's a very difficult time to be asked to think about structural change when there's so many tactical things coming at us, right? And so I recognize that this might be a heads down moment to some extent, and that's fine. But we should still be thinking about the longer term, impact. And I would say, in closing, that I actually think AI is is more structurally transformational and good in good ways, but also kind of scary ways, more so than what's going on right now on the political environment. Um, that will, I don't want to say that will pass, but it is I feel like that's a time-based problem, whereas the other is shifting to a world that we can't even fully understand.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Kathleen.